Get you a chapter or so of Wild Hunt. This is available through Amazon. There is a link in the uh, notes section. Wild Hunt by Nick Rowan. Inkstain Succubus Productions. For to see Mad Tom of Bedlam, 10,000 miles I traveled. Mad Maudlin goes on dirty toes to save her shoes from gravel. Still I sing bonny boys, bonny mad boys. Bedlam boys are bonny, for they all go bare, and they live by the air, and they want no drink nor money. I went to Satan's kitchen for to get me food one morning, and there I got souls piping hot, all on the spit a turning. With the queen of ghosts and shadows I summoned am to tourney, 10 leagues beyond the wide world's end. Methinks it is no journey. Bedlam Boys, Traditional. Chapter 1. Captain Morgan is my reality filter, and some days, like this particular October Wednesday, I needed all the filtering I could get. Most days, even days with a pollen count through the roof and the sticky Memphis humidity, I got by just fine. I'd known the day would be bad when my phone went off at 7. Only the Memphis PD rings in on the Andy Griffith theme. I found the thing after much frantic, half-asleep scrambling through the bedclothes, and caught the call half a ring before it would have gone to voicemail. I probably should have let it, all things considered. "Admire here," I snarled. It was too damn early to be polite, and my late-night rendezvous with the captain left my eyeballs trying to eat my brain with tiny, sharp teeth. "Miss Admire, Captain Williams, I need to see you. I have something my officers can't handle. Not even the preternatural and magical squadron can figure it out. If the bitch patrol, a crack squad of 8 top-rated sorceresses, witches, and talismongers, couldn't handle something, I sure as hell didn't want it. I'm just a no-talent PI, without enough magic to train. I've got just enough to drive me straight into the night side and the bottle." So far, I was still holding the bottle instead of the other way around. No talents like me ended one of 3 ways. We were found ripped apart by something night-side, we went out with a needle in our arms, or died with antifreeze in our veins. I wasn't the druggy sort, but those who knew me had their bets on the other 2. I thought about the last few jobs I'd done. I thought about the fact the cops did pay. I thought about my rent. I thought about my dwindling store of Captain Morgan. That did it. Despite my pounding head, I pulled myself out of the Murphy bed in my office, ignoring the protests my body was lodging from every joint. Darn long legs, it feels further to the floor every year. I yanked on a plain brown t-shirt, jeans, and my battered sneakers. Deodorized, brushed my teeth, threw my hair into a ponytail, and headed down to 201 Poplar to see Captain Williams and Lieutenant Hacker of the PMS. Yeah, the acronym's deliberate. They prefer PM Squad, which kind of covers everything night side. 7 minutes, 18 seconds, a new hangover record for getting out of the office. So, not a morning person. Never have been. At least I lived in town and avoided the jams on the 240 loop. But as always, the blocks around 201 Poplar were a mess of cop cars and traffic, which only made my bad mood turn spectacularly foul when I got downtown. Crosstown to downtown was only a few miles, and I took the Madison trolley as far as I could, not feeling up to driving yet. The 5-block walk helped clear my head. Nothing could be good if they were calling me in to look at it, especially not this early. 2 hours later, I was sitting back at my desk, pouring myself a much too early drink, and staring at one of the ugliest serial killer cases I'd ever seen. Bad enough when they're killing prostitutes or drunks. Some people even consider that a public service. But this one. 6 children, 2 each on the night of the full moon. Each one asleep in their own house in their own little bed. 3 girls and 3 boys found dead by their parents, blood soaking the beds and carpets, all the flesh missing from hip joint to knee. I vaguely remembered hearing something on the radio about the first 2 killings 3 months ago. I didn't have a TV news, and I avoided internet news when I could. I read the local indie paper and a nightside newspaper. My cases found me. I didn't go looking for them. Considering my state of being perpetually broke, I wondered if I should revise my business plan. Nah, better for my blood pressure this way. I checked, though, and there was nothing on any site about the other 4 deaths beyond obituaries. Someone was keeping a very tight lid on this case. Avoiding both a media circus and public panic were the likely explanations. Tourism already sucked in this town, at least after August was over and the faithful had been to Graceland to await the second coming of Elvis. I understand he always serenades the tourists at twilight on his crossing day. And now, someone over Lieutenant Hacker's pay grade had hauled me in on the case, to the disgust of the PM squad. I suspected it was not only my rates, but the fact I was a totally expendable no talent. I knew it wasn't my kind thoughts and cherry blossom personality. The good lieutenant wanted this kept in-house and under wraps and preferably solved before the killer struck again. What Lieutenant Hacker wanted, she got. Those who failed to give it to her had a bad habit of waking up in different shapes than they went to bed. She wanted this tied up in a pretty black velvet bow before the feds invited themselves in on the case. What I was reading said they should have already been involved. The local politics here were as sticky as any in Chicago or New Jersey, and they had closed ranks with the bitch patrol on point. That shield wall was about to crumble. The local media wasn't going to keep quiet much longer, and the DA had cold feet about a lawsuit that could ruin his own political aspirations. I didn't blame the ones who wanted to know. If I had kids in my life, I'd want to. And now this big ugly mess had been dumped in my lap. I was suspected I wasn't the only independent on it either. I just stared. 6 kids killed, and not a sound heard by parents or anyone else in the house, and no trace of the missing flesh. 3 girls, 3 boys, 2 black, 3 white, 1 Hispanic. No pattern, not even a common neighborhood. The deaths were scattered from Bartlett to Raleigh to Orange Mound. I didn't want to look at the names or pictures. That was more than I wanted to know about the kids. But I did anyway and was immediately sorry. These things always had some kind of pattern, but I couldn't find it today. What did I expect, really? The PM squad had been working for months. Was I going to find it in less than 3 hours? Oh, sure, let me break out the magic rum bottle and turn it over. Pour another and ask again. That's what it always says, so I followed directions and kept at it. I went down the mental checklist I devised years ago for this kind of thing, certain I'd overlooked something. The MPD had impressed me for once. They had chased out every lead and angle I could think of, and a few I hadn't considered. Only once the case had been ruled impossible had it been given to the bitch patrol. 2 of the houses had alarm systems that were turned on that night, but not tripped. One of the kids had been sharing a room with an older brother and the family dog, neither of whom woke up. One of the kids had been sleeping with her grandma, who awakened to blood soaking her sheets and nightgown, the police report said. One of the families even lived in a gated community with a guard shack, security cameras everywhere, routine rent-a-cop courtesy patrols, fancy hidden motion detectors that tripped if anything bigger than a squirrel hopped the wall, and all the other bells and whistles. Nothing reported out of the ordinary the night of the killing, right up until the frantic 911 call the next morning. No common ancestry. One family had lived in Memphis since the 1800s. One had moved in 2 months ago. No common military experience. Every family had someone in the service. But a grandfather who helped take Iwo Jima and a Coast Guard brother posted up the road in Millington were no connection. This wasn't going to be like the time some Desert Storm National Guard kid hadn't been careful about his souvenirs and unleashed a djinn on the city from a spiffy old lamp he brought back to the wife. Djinn get very foul-tempered if their lamps aren't big enough. Lots of questions, no answers. The official reports were written in that dry, clinical language which lets people step away from the horror. The internal squad memos were richer ground, the stuff that couldn't go into the reports they made into the human PD. All the guesswork, wild suspicions, personal theories, and increasingly frustrated memos was here in the notes they shared with each other. Sergeant Ainsley, the squad sensitive, said the children had never awakened. They had stayed asleep right up until death. That was one small mercy. The pall of magic hung over all the rooms, sleep spells for everyone. Most magic that powerful plays hell with sensitive electronics. Sometimes even my pitiful little aura blows out the computer. But the security cameras didn't have the telltale static that indicated human magic. Nightsiders don't set off cameras like human magic users do. At least not the ones who show up on them. There are a fair few who don't. I went over the files again, still looking for a common factor in the families. I had a gut feeling I was missing something, but there was just a big nothing. One was a grandmother raising 4 grandkids, a couple basic nuclear families, a divorced mom, a never married mom, income levels from 6 figures to dirt poor. The only possible connection is they were all purely human with no night cider or magical admixture. The gruesome black and white photo of one of the children's legs haunted me. I think they grayscaled it to make it less horrible than the color one. The blood-stained bottom of his sleep shorts flapped around smeared bone until his shockingly intact kneecap and calf lay on the soaked Spider-Man sheets. Blood never looks quite real in photos. It's always too red or too brown in the color ones. It looks fake. In black and white, it just looks like chocolate syrup. Blood's only real if you're smelling the hot iron of it and feeling its stickiness. I should know ideal enough of it. There wasn't anything interviewing the families could tell me. I needed more information than I had, and they wouldn't know the answers. I knew the PM squad had already Googled and researched the existing data to death. Every website they had hit was listed in nice, neat alphabetical order in the file, along with the data from it. I poured myself some coffee, tired of rum, and thought. The victimology wasn't turning up similarities, so on to the wounds. I thought about the pictures of the wounds again. It looked as if someone had just run a super sharp knife around the legs at the bottom of the underpants and the top of the knee. I had the image of flesh being split away from the bone like foam insulation off a pipe. That was going to stick a while. I poured some rum into my empty coffee cup. The cleanness of the removal made something tickle in my brain, but I couldn't think what it was. No, this was a human, or mostly human killing, but not the usual kind. They wouldn't call me in for a guy mad at his girlfriend or a pissed off stepdad who decides to take it out on the kids because it'll hurt the woman more. But for a human killing, there was something really night-sight about this case, and I couldn't figure it out. I'd better get on the stick, though. I had 21 days to save the next kids from a nasty death. Night-side work again. Once you get a rep for it in this business, you never work with humans again. No talents like me don't get to socialize with the Nightsiders, only clean up their messes. Clean up enough messes, and humans can smell it like a stench and avoid you. Not that I care about being around people, just that I like my corpses to stay dead. On the night side of Memphis, there are all kinds of dead, from walking around working dead like the zombies on President Island to running the whole vampire underworld dead like Elvis, or the orderly lined up to vote dead. I don't mind those. It's the ripping the throat out of the neighborhood PI dead I object to. Call me a lifeist. Me? I wasn't dead. Not yet, and I plan to keep it that way. And I was going to do my best to make sure some parent didn't wake up to a horrible surprise on the morning after Halloween. I took another drink, girded myself for battle as it were, scowled at my computer, hoping it was in a reasonably cooperative mood, then reached out and turned it on, bracing for the shock it occasionally gave me. My cousin Jinx thinks I'm nuts for talking about my computer as if it's a thinking thing, and acting as if it doesn't like me any more than most people do. I tell him it's called artificial intelligence for a reason, and the damn box is smarter than he is. No shock today, but Google was singularly uncooperative. I started digging on huntthenight.com, the night site search engine. My fingers crossed the dread My fingers crossed the dread machine wouldn't explode. Oh, they were both just energy. Electricity doesn't always mix well with magic, even my little bit of nothing, and the results could be unstable. I needed leads. I typed in the first thing I could think of, children's thighs. I got lots of dissertations on thigh pain in children. The suggestion of baked children's thighs made me raise an eyebrow, knowing my machine's sense of humor, and that the search engine was hooked over into Nightside sources. But I checked it out. Lots of baked chicken recipes and nothing worse. I poured another drink, needing it to steady my nerves. It was going to be a gruesome lunch hour. Then I tried cut children's thighs. Bingo! So that's what they didn't want to tell me. That was the conclusion all the evidence pointed to, and they had not included in the file. I wasn't sure if they were testing me or if they were skittish about having drawn that conclusion. 6 stories down, under the breaking news story off our TV channel, under 4 articles about self-injuring behavior, there it was. Tom O'Bedlam. Well, shit. My staff has murdered giants, my bag a long knife carries, for to cut mince pies from children's thighs, with which to feed the fairies. I thought I'd remembered something in fairy lore about that, and here it was. Fae were further down my research list, and I really didn't want it to be Tom O'Bedlam. Maybe there were other options. I ran over my checklist mentally, looking for the loopholes. Wasn't likely to be a throat killing. They were a little frisky right before and after the full, but they would have showed up on security cameras. Most thropes didn't hunt humans anyway, preferring to nap and play the full moon away on full bellies, safely locked in basements, fenced yards, or secured out with buildings. But that was only the wolves. We had a few were-rats in town, one I bribed on occasion, but they were pretty peaceable. Untrustworthy and thieving, sure, but peaceable. They weren't prone to violence. They liked their goodies, and violence brought attention, which made enjoying the goodies more difficult. But there were always exceptions, and I wasn't sure the one on my payroll was the only exception. Down in the Asian areas of town, there were always new and awful things arriving out of local myth, and I'd heard rumors that Kitsune had moved in recently. Those didn't target children, preferring adult men. I'd hold on to that, but it looked too big for a fox killing. Vampires were only after the blood. Their MO tended to be stealth and speed, and not a drop left. These were way too messy. Blood everywhere. A terrible waste of vampire thinking. Vamps didn't show up on security cameras, and most were very territorial. The killings were all over the map, in several territories. One vamp would have trouble explaining why he was off his turf for a late dinner. Zombies, contrary to popular movie myth, didn't kill, unless they got out from under their spells. Those that did seldom got more than a bite or two out of the foreman before being put down. We hadn't had a targeted zombie killing in a century. Ghosts didn't kill. Oh, sure, they compelled people into dangerous situations, walking along cliffs and rooftops, waving candles and torches around rooms, instead of outright attacks, but for the most part they didn't harm people. They were too localized, tending to haunt one specific place or family. The idea of a necromancer had already occurred to the PM squad, and the file contained interviews with every known spellcaster in town. I hadn't realized there were so many. Every member of the Delta Bluesmen, our local combat mage unit, had given a statement. The 4 active non-religious covens had been talked to, and 7 other circles. They'd even interviewed the religious witches and the solitaries who didn't belong to any group, through lack of talent or lack of interest in politics. What startled me was the interviews with a dozen members of the Mississippi River Wizards Guild, a highly prestigious, very exclusive group that almost never bothered in human affairs. Even our regional Witan councilman had gotten a call. When it was big enough to go clear up to the worldwide ruling body of mana users, it was beyond big and about to break wide open. Lucky me. I got this magnificent elephant of a case dropped in my lap. Please not Tom O'Bedlam, I whispered to my weirdness magnet. Several of the names had been interviewed twice, and one a third time. Dr. Bryant from the University of Memphis Metaphysical Studies Department had been a total dead end. I noted her name, plus a few others who might be willing to talk to me. DeMarco Jackson, president of the Bluesmen, could be helpful when he wanted to. I'd heard rumors his girlfriend was a no talent. The local Satanist group had been checked, of course. I knew a couple, and they were more interested in drinking wine and talking hedonistic philosophy and wearing a lot of black than they were in magic and ritual and sacrifice. There were always cults, but it would take an organized cult to pull this off, and most were fairly disorganized, usually unable to coordinate more than 3 orgies before their adherents drifted back to more mainstream faiths. I checked the information in the file on the local Elder Gods cultists, 4 of them still in the mental hospital at Bolivar, and the other 3 lying low and staying quiet. They liked their sacrifices bigger anyway. A car backfired on the street and I jumped. My neat train of thought completely derailed, no survivors. I took the information from the top. Full moon on Halloween. It was going to be a hot time in the old town that night. Full moons made the pixies frisky and a lot of nightsiders more active. The vampires tended to stay on Halloween, but the werewolves would be running. The were-rats, were-cats, and all the other tropes, and possibly the kitsune too. But they were minor concerns. We didn't have very many local tropes. For the longest time it had been a family unit of 3 with a couple cousins not in the pack proper. The late old man Camamescro rode tight herd on his son and grandson. Nice folks. Dan taught English at the local college before he'd moved to Wisconsin. His uncle Zoltan was in logistics and had stayed in town. He had finally stepped up and gotten the rogue element in line. It had taken the arrogant ass long enough. He wasn't the wolf his father was and never would be, but he was shaping up better than I expected. The cousins were on my very occasional payroll. They were still at the bottom of my suspect list. Might check the layabouts, but still, security cameras. Vampires still entirely out of the question. We hadn't had an exsanguination in nearly 3 decades. Elvis keeps his people in line. He had made it very clear that tasting was fine, but eating people was out of the question. Unlike a lot of the ancient old world vampires, especially around Chicago and St. Louis, Elvis liked humans. Then again, he'd only crossed in 1977, making him practically an infant in their opinion. Still, he'd made it clear Memphis was his town, and nobody killed in his town. It drew too much heat from the humans. Sergeant Ainsley had gotten definite intelligence readings from the scene, not just animalistic hunger. Most predator species would rend and tear the whole body. The wounds were neat, not ragged from hacking or a saw, let alone teeth. That was the place to start. Child eaters and tool users. I ran down the mental list of local critters. Goatmen and gretches could be taken off the list. These were indoor killings. Those avoided structures. A ghoul would have eaten the whole body, down to sucking marrow out of the cracked bones. They preferred the dead anyway. It would have shown up on surveillance, too. Giants, ogres, and trolls were out of the question, even some of the ancient ones who could fly. Those were much too noticeable, even in the ghetto, where people didn't ever see anything. They still saw those half-sentient mountains lumbering around, setting off every dog, cat, and oversensitive car alarm. Again, security cameras, and they would have eaten everything and everyone in the house. I checked the last known locations of notorious child-devouring monsters, the ones that were nearly human. Black Annis was still imprisoned in Kent. Baba Yaga had been chained near Novgorod for 100 years, since before World War I. I guess Bolsheviks were good for something. Lilith was safe in a night-side prison in Tel Aviv. I hadn't known they dug night-side prison cells that deep. None of the families were Jewish or Russian anyway. Ostrega would take only the blood, again. A Lamia or Goblin would have taken the kid whole, although a couple of nasty Sumerian demons could have done this. Cuckoo was a possibility given the Hispanic kid, but again, too neat for him. I still wasn't going to be hungry for lunch, as I read about everything from Huangpu river demons in China to Danish Valraven, which eat men slain in battle, gain intelligence but can only fly by night. The killings did all happen at night, and something that flew could answer a lot of the questions about entrances and exit routes. That rather than have to eat the heart of a child to break the curse and become a wolf or raven hybrid. That sounded a little far-fetched even to me, and I worked with pixies and werewolves on a regular basis. Besides, the hearts weren't missing. That eliminated the most obvious Nightsiders. Yay for new and exciting cases. I had eliminated the impossible and did not want to admit to what was left. It was only 11 in the morning, but I poured myself the end of the rum anyway. Sun was over the yardarm somewhere, and I didn't give a damn for proper anyhow. It looked like a 5-bottle case, and this was my last one in the office. The police department paid me my usual retainer through Halloween. I closed the files, went and paid my rent for November. My landlady, Frau Blucher, name changed to protect the psychopathic, nearly fainted. Then I walked down the block to the liquor store. From the way the ground felt, I'd already had too much to drive, and it wasn't even noon. Damn. I was good and only bought 1 bottle. I considered groceries, but I had a few frozen dinners, plus some peanut butter and bread. Food doesn't do much for me at the best of times, and this case looked like it was going to kill my appetite for a while. The crime scene photos had trashed my desire for food. Back in the office, I did some map work, plotting and overlaying the locations of the killings on a map of the town. I resisted the call of my captain and the coffee pot both. I didn't need the distraction of running to the bathroom. So I settled back in the chair, locked my hands behind my head, and let my eyes unfocus, trying to find anything. I racked my brains for anything that might connect the killings. Aside from a full moon and wound patterns, nothing. No common topographical features. Landmarks, historical sites, cemeteries, nothing. Aside from Fort Pickering and a couple of places out in Germantown or Collierville, we didn't have any battlefields to be haunted. Waterways, train tracks, historical roadways. I was coming up blank. I checked for ferry mounds, but they had left Memphis ages ago. The nearest was about 50 miles north and east in the Loosahatchee Wildlife Refuge. Maybe I could rule out Tom. If the Fae were that far away, why would he be feeding them? The planetary alignments were as much a zero as dimensional alignments. The Shelby County line, where it bordered Tipton County and Fayette County, didn't affect them, being a fictional human-created boundary. There weren't any notable Nightsider turf wars near any of the murder sites, outside of the occasional gang skirmish for the last couple decades. I had a moment of excitement when I found that 2 of the houses were on the same ley line, but the rest were nowhere near it, or near the other one that runs through Memphis. I knew I was getting desperate when I started adding UFO sightings into the equation. Those feels like trying to pop a combination lock by dialing in random numbers. No pattern, no continuity. What had I expected anyway? An inverted pentagram with the next kid's house right in the center? That would have been a nice change, something easy and straightforward. How about it, huh? I grumbled at my weirdest magnet, the only significant power in my life. Instead of talking dogs using me as a shrink, how about one case that falls into place all nice and pretty? Then again, if it had been easy, they'd have never called for me. DJ Admire doesn't get straightforward because the universe is laughing behind my back. Not even my bathroom mirror is showing me nice or pretty. I'm not even sure the PM squad knew why they sent cases my way. I sure didn't. I did not want to tangle with Tom O'Bedlam. I didn't know much about who he was, but I didn't want him. I knew the bitch patrol knew. They didn't want him either. That told me I certainly didn't want him. The whole thing read setup. It hit me. This wasn't a mystery. They didn't need me to solve it. It was a bounty hunt, with just enough data omitted to make it look like a case. They wanted me to make it right. I hunted him up on the Nightside search engine since Wikipedia only gave out the information that Tom O'Bedlam was a medieval name for a beggar who was either legitimately mentally ill or feigning illness. Bedlam came from Bethlehem Mental Hospital in London. One of the early uses was in King Lear. Whoop-de-doo! Now I had trivia. I needed fact. Hunt the Night was more forthcoming. For another 20 minutes, I really didn't want this job. I considered returning the files in the advance. The mad demon had ported into our plane sometime in the Middle Ages and led everyone to marry Chase since. He never stayed long in one place, seldom more than 6 months or a year, and many people believed he was responsible for about half the legends of nightmare monsters. He had an appetite for human flesh, and to say he was capricious was an understatement. He was a fugitive from his plane of origin, a plane famous for cooking, feasting, and generally all forms of kitchen work. Originally one of the greatest of his people, renowned for his subtle dishes and perfect presentation, he had snapped. At the celebration of the head chef's 10,000th year presiding over the dimension, Tom pulled a Titus Andronicus and served up the chef's own children in a pie, and then he scarpered before the chef could kill him on the spot. Charming creature! I was gonna get Sergeant Thomas for this one. The squad seer and Google genius had to know what was up. I was willing to bet they all knew. They were supposed to handle law and order from the night side, but they always foisted interlopers like this onto me and a few others like me. What can you do? The squad had the badges and guns, and they still didn't want to tangle. I knew I didn't. There was a demon loose in my town hurting my people, and the cops paid. They'd paid me a 3-week retainer. I hated the logical part of my brain that insisted I pay my bills and keep booze on the desk. Bounty hunt. I was paid in advance because I might not walk away from this one. I had until Halloween to deplane this crazy bastard. It would be easiest to do it closer to that date. The planes all lined up a little better and the walls between the worlds went thinner then. This was going to take more firepower than I had. Thank you for joining me. That was Chapter 1 of Wild Hunt by Nick Rowan. The rest of the book is available for purchase on Amazon. Or you can join my Patreon, www.patreon.com/NickRowan, R-O-W-A-N. Thank you for joining me today. Have a good evening. We'll make it through this.